Engaging the Visual Spatial Intelligence, Rethinking School Curriculum. If some students see the world not through words or numbers, but through shapes, colors, and visual relationships, then why do so many classrooms rely almost entirely on text-based instruction and linear thinking? Why do we continue to measure intelligence in paragraphs and equations while ignoring the power of visual imagination, spatial awareness, and design thinking? Could it be that students with strong visual spatial intelligence are often misunderstood, not because they lack ability, but because we fail to teach in their language, image, pattern, and form? If thinking in pictures is their strength, then education should be a canvas where their vision, creativity, and perception are celebrated, not sidelined. Visual spatial learners excel when they're allowed to see ideas take shape, manipulate space, and connect meaning through imagery. They can interpret a painting's symbolism, mentally rotate a 3D object, or understand how color and form influence perception and emotion. But if we never invite them to design a layout, storyboard a concept, or map out relationships through visual means, how can they fully engage with what they're learning? Wouldn't a classroom that includes mind mapping, visual storytelling, and design-based problem solving allow them to think in the ways that come most naturally, through vision, space, and creative composition? Imagine asking a visual spatial learner to design a costume based on a literary character, create a blueprint of a historical building, or develop a logo that represents a philosophical idea. These are not just artistic tasks. They're deep intellectual exercises that require interpretation, synthesis, and strategic thinking, all conveyed through visual form. Or let them reimagine a classroom layout for better group interaction. Construct a 3D model of a molecule, or even visually analyze the composition of a powerful photojournalism piece. Aren't these equally valuable ways of understanding, expressing, and applying knowledge? These learners also excel in real-world spatial tasks, packing efficiently, navigating unfamiliar spaces, or designing environments that balance function and beauty. Their intelligence is practical, intuitive, and often remarkably underused in traditional academic settings. Shouldn't education also teach students how visual design shapes communication, behavior, branding, architecture, and emotional tone in the world around us? From interpreting a graph to designing an infographic, from creating visual metaphors to planning urban spaces, visual spatial thinkers can be powerful problem solvers, if only we let them express their ideas in visual form. If we continue to expect visual spatial learners to process abstract ideas through only written or spoken words, we're not just limiting their engagement, we're erasing their unique lens on the world. So the real question is, are we creating classrooms that allow students to think in images, construct in space, and communicate through design? Or are we still privileging text at the expense of imagination? Because when students are given the opportunity to see meaning, shape ideas, and build beauty with intention, they don't just observe. They transform the world through the power of vision. Visual spatial intelligence is not just about artistic ability or the skill to draw. It is the deep capacity to think in images, perceive relationships between objects, navigate space creatively, and imagine solutions through visualization. Students gifted with this form of intelligence see the world as patterns, shapes, designs, and possibilities. Yet traditional education, so often dominated by text-heavy, sequential, and auditory methods, rarely gives these learners the opportunity to think, express, and understand in the visual language they know best. If imagination is how they build meaning, shouldn't school be a place where their visions are not just tolerated, but celebrated and developed? Imagine classrooms where students are encouraged to map out historical timelines visually, sketch scientific processes as flow diagrams, design architectural models for math problems, or create symbolic representations of philosophical ideas. Instead of simply writing essays, visual spatial learners could be asked to craft mind maps, design storyboards, or illustrate complex systems. Wouldn't this kind of environment turn school into a place where these students' strengths are tools for deep learning, not obstacles to conforming? When visual spatial intelligence is properly engaged, students don't just memorize, they visualize, synthesize, and innovate. They can see multiple angles of a problem simultaneously, recognize hidden patterns, and imagine new structures before they are built. Over time, this leads to adults who can design cities that are sustainable, craft user experiences that feel intuitive, envision architectural spaces that uplift communities, and communicate abstract ideas in tangible, compelling ways. Visual thinkers are not just artists. They are engineers, innovators, strategists, and visionaries. Fostering this intelligence also develops systems thinking, the ability to see how parts connect into meaningful wholes. These learners naturally grasp relationships between ideas, symmetries within systems, and potential pathways for innovation. In a world increasingly demanding holistic creative solutions, whether in climate action, technology, design, or healthcare, shouldn't we be equipping and encouraging those who can hold complex visual systems in their minds and shape them into coherent, functional realities? Moreover, visual spatial intelligence fosters a profound emotional and aesthetic sensitivity. Students who think visually often understand mood, balance, and the unspoken feel of a place or experience. They are able to read nonverbal cues, design environments that influence behavior, and translate emotions into colors, spaces, and forms. In a world dominated by noise, they offer silence that speaks volumes through architecture that heals, art that provokes thought, design that builds bridges across cultures. Isn't this kind of communication every bit as essential as verbal fluency? If we continue to treat learning as only a text-based auditory process, we fail not only these students, but society itself. We risk producing thinkers who can follow instructions but cannot reimagine broken systems. What if instead we taught students to express data through visual storytelling, to design solutions through modeling and spatial reasoning, and to present knowledge as experiences, not just reports? Wouldn't we then be nurturing the architects, designers, urban planners, filmmakers, animators, and future builders the world so desperately needs? To truly engage visual spatial intelligence, educators must integrate visual thinking into all subjects. Encourage students to draw, model, design, photograph, map, and visualize their understanding. Invite them to dream in blueprints, to solve problems through diagrams, and to argue positions with infographics rather than essays alone. Visual thinking should be a foundational mode of learning, not an elective for the few, but a language available to all. When we engage the visual spatial mind fully, we don't just create better artists or designers. We create systems thinkers, boundary crossers, and creators of beauty and function. We foster individuals who can see possibilities others miss and who can turn visions into realities that improve lives. In doing so, education becomes not just a preparation for work, it becomes an invitation to imagine and build a better world.